What's up, everybody? It's the Monday show on a Tuesday. It's for my boy Chris that did yesterday's episode of Inside Table Talk with me. That was we kept talking about the Bill Burr voice that plays in his head every time he hears me say it's the Monday show. So I hope everyone's having a great week so far. If you have not been to one of these before, this is the monthly free show of a weekly show that we usually do just with patrons, where folks hang out. We catch up on the news of the week. I take questions. We do like a big AMA, and generally just all commiserate about the hobby and what we got going on. I have a lovely group of patrons, about 625 of you guys now, that hang out with me weekly and give topics for us to talk about, take questions, and also join us for things like Inside Tabletop with Jared yesterday. The rapid melting of the 2 feet or so of snow here in St. Catharines caused me a little bit of consternation yesterday, so I had to tend to some water-based weather events, which is, anyone who's a long-time GMG watcher knows, is my kryptonite. Water has been actively trying to kill me my entire life. I might be Bruce Willis from Unbreakable. We'll find out. But we got some news going on. I'm going to say hi to the chat, see what's going on with everybody. We'll catch up on everything that's been happening this past week and weekend, although you guys will be a little bit caught up on that already because yesterday was Inside Tabletop, although they usually go out on Sundays. I had to do some editing. And then they'll be coming out every Sunday for the rest of March, February and March. As well as the first game in our new Void Admiral Renegade Warfleets campaign that Bob and I managed to record. We recorded 3 games, which was fantastic. And we got through the first act of the campaign and half of the second act, doing a Horus Heresy scouring thing, which was super fun. And if you guys haven't checked out Void Admiral, it got a GMG review a while ago. We did a mini campaign based on the rulebook, and it's got its first supplement, which adds a whole bunch of things, like if you want to use hex-based mats. It's a really cool indie miniatures agnostic spaceship game by Paul Bantock out in the west coast of Canada, and we've had a lot of fun playing it the last little while. So that's kind of what we've been working on, and you got to see the first thing. So let's go see who's in the chat. This is going to be a full house today, because obviously we have a bunch of non-patrons hanging out today, because this is live and public on YouTube. But I'm going to drink my coffee. We're going to go for about an hour usually, take some questions for the chat. There's a patron mailbag, which the patrons fill up with questions, which we'll go through as well. And then just talk about the news, because there's some exciting announcements that happened over the weekend, and some just random GW bits to talk about as well. So we'll see what's happening. And I'll take questions, of course, from the chat. So those of you who aren't patrons, throw your questions in the chat now, because the more questions there are, the more random stuff that we talk about, and you get to pick my brain. This is your once a month chance, so go for it. Matt Olson's here, hopefully live and direct from Not the Barn, which sometimes he is with his horse. That's how you know Matt's is a patron, is the fact that I know that he's often in the barn with a horse. Brian Krantz is here, Acrylic Chemist here, Dan Sprinkle's here, Ryan Dunphy's here, Gary Lee's here, Lurkin Nagel's here, Miso is here from the UK. We'll talk about Blackout, actually, yes. And Lord Chompy Bits is also here. Brian Sheen's here. Atron X is here. And Ghost Mutton is here. Fantastic. We got a full house today. Lots of stuff going on. So I am excited for a whole bunch of things that are happening right now. But primarily, one of the things I'm most excited about is we had a Modiphius announcement this past weekend. And I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with our boys at Modiphius, but they have a cool new thing to show you called Hard War. Hard War has actually been in development for a while, but I guess they're partnering with Chris from Modiphius to do miniature production. And there's a big announcement on the UK website. So if you're logged into the Modiphius US website, you probably won't have seen this, because to show it to you guys just now, I was not able to change my region to local, because it's always going to ask me, do you want to go to North America? And then still be able to see it. But Hard War has been something that's been kicking around the indie sphere for a while, and it looks like it's getting a full 6mm miniature release. So Hard War is a tactical company level 6mm game. And you can hear some of the miniatures they've previewed. So these look like, I don't know what the material is going to be, obviously, but they do look like they're the same type of miniatures they'd already been working on in 3D prints. If it's Modiphius, there's a good chance it's going to be in that Modiphius Siocast that a lot of the Fallout miniatures and the Elder Scrolls miniatures are in, which is a fine material. I've painted all of them and they're fine. Although there's an outside chance too, because I haven't found any info about the miniature stuff yet, because it's just like a teaser site. That it's going to be Hips Plastic, because the newer Fallout miniatures are all in high impact styrene. So yeah, they're cool looking minis though, and I do love a 6mm robot game, and I do have a variety of friends who will absolutely play something like this with me. So that was some interesting news from the weekend. I don't know who's hot for 6mm right now, but we played a whole bunch of games just recently that were in this scale, and obviously with Workshop returning and BattleTech, blowing up over the last few years, and then Workshop returning to Legions Imperialis, there's been a lot of like terrain released in that scale. It's becoming a more common than it used to be sort of dynamic. And one of the barriers very often to like small millimeter gaming has always been that you need to have like a separate terrain collection. Like with the exception of like hills, a lot of times you have to have separate buildings and separate rivers and separate like trees, even in a different scale. Although arguably in 6mm, a lot of smaller trees, like the smaller Gale Force 9 Battlefield in the Box trees, are the perfect scale for like BattleTech, because a 3-inch tall tree is like just a full ground mature tree. Like that's just what that looks like at 6mm. So arguably a lot of those trees are too small for 28mm gaming. Like trees should be like this big in 28mm gaming, and often they're like advanced shrubs. It's an advanced shrubbery more than anything else. So yeah, it's neat to see that scale kind of coming back. And one of the things that I think is interesting about it is historically we've struggled, and I think Workshop is kind of guilty of this, as you get older as a company, you want people to buy more stuff because that's the only reason. That's your customers come back to buy more things so they can use their whole collection. And so your game size creeps bigger, and very often they have to do like a big reset where they kind of slam the game size back down, because eventually it outgrows the table. Like Workshop being on a 5 by not quite 4 foot table right now, the collection on the table gets really crowded. It's hard to play a game. Like it's hard to even fit your miniatures on and have you feel like you're maneuvering in like a relevant way. It's why the early editions of AOS, I think, felt a little bit better, because the model count even was more like a 3rd or 4th edition 40k game where you're trucking between 25 and 30 models on the table. Not as Space Marines. Space Marines might have like 15 to 20 models on the table when you included vehicles and like walkers and stuff like that. As it expands bigger, one of the problems becomes the actual like dimensions of the table. And with like the trend away from in-store gaming at Workshop in particular, but also even in friendly local game stores where they're just so crammed full of product, unless you're like a dedicated gaming club, very often more people are playing at home. I have a whole theory about this, about how gaming mats have basically changed the world and revolutionized in-home gaming. But 6mm kind of makes sense, because instead of making the table bigger, you make the miniature smaller, and you can have like a relevant and an expansive feeling like company level game on like a 3x4 space at 6mm, right? Because you basically have just shrunk the miniatures instead of like expanding the table. And it's a very satisfying like game size to play as well. So playing Full Spectrum Dominance, playing we just recently played that steampunk one too from War Cradle. Why am I losing it? Dystopian, it's the Dystopian Wars one. Whatever that one was called. The not Dystopian Wars one. That whole idea of shrinking the miniatures a little bit, I think Workshop's kind of normalizing it again with Legions, and so the industry and BattleTech obviously has done a whole bunch to normalize that as well. I think that's pulling the industry into that direction in like a comfortable way. People aren't so put off by it. So let's see what's going on in the chat. We've got more people here. Bruce Patnode, I think it says. And Cheeses is here. Who else is here? Chris Fisher's here. Lazy Pirate Painting's here. Tobias Newman's here. And Gary Jensen's here. Fantastic. So yeah, let's jump in and see what questions we have from the chat, and I'll take some questions from the mailbag, and then I'll go back to the other news of the week, because there's obviously tons of like interesting news happening right now in the world of wargaming. And Malev's here. Fantastic. The whole gang's here. All of the usual suspects. I have to scroll up in the chat, so I have to actually go over to the chat and see what I've missed, because I've missed a whole bunch of stuff. Misa Misa says, hey, from the UK, Ash, what is your on the table at the moment? Any more Blackout? Any more media shows, reviewing books and movies, etc.? I'm going to go see The Monkey this week as part of that, because I really like The Monkey is right up there. Right up there. I think with the exciting new grimdark things. And it's also funny. I have some friends I've seen already, and they were like, it's hilarious. It's not Longlegs, but it's Oz Perkins's like take on Stephen King. And very often it's funny because you've got Oz Perkins, the son of Anthony Perkins from Psycho, directing these movies. It's I think this was like an M. Night Shyamalan problem. It's very often someone has a hit movie, like Longlegs was big for a horror movie, and they get pigeonholed into like, this is the kind of movie you make. And from what I can see, this is not what The Monkey is. The Monkey it's like a funnier, more insane, over the top Final Destination, which is very Stephen King. And so you've got the Mike Flanagan's doing Stephen King, and then you've also got Oz Perkins doing Stephen King, and they're doing it very Stephen King, but like very Stephen King in two completely different ways, where I think Flanagan's doing the serious side, and then the humor side is coming from Oz Perkins, which is exciting. So yeah, let's talk about Blackout real fast, because they've got some announcements. Which I'm excited for. They've announced 3 new unit sets for their 2 players, for their original factions, actually. So if you haven't seen Blackout, this is a hyper skirmish. You use like between like, it's infinity scale, so like between like 10 and 15 models maybe at the max. They got this new 2-player starter set, but they've done some new, I'm just going to click over to the news here. It's like a near future like skirmish game. Mike and Rob and I have done a bunch of gaming for it. And yeah, here's February 19th. Here's some of the new news for Proving Grounds 3, which has some cool new units, which I'm super excited about. Look at how cool these guys are. So if you like that like Neil Blomkamp near future skirmish style game, that's what the guys at Blackout are making. And their miniature releases are very much in that style. So they've just done a release with these new guys, the big old, whatchamacallits, they have a special name for these guys. I can't remember what they're called. They're dusters, sorry, that's what they're called, yeah. I keep wanting to say the Titans, because it has a Titanfall look to it from the head, but their dusters have gotten some new sculpts and stuff that look really, really cool. And then they've got a whole bunch of like new releases planned for the original 2 factions, so like new units, because it uses a slot selection type for army creation, and this is their most recent 2-player starter set. So you have the UN on one side, and then and these are like hard plastic. You've got the sort of like slots that you fill, and they have the mini robots, which are here, that you can fill up a slot with, and then each of these units will also fill up a slot. So typically you play like 3 to 4 slots of like army selection sort of, and each of these will like fill a role. So smaller things, like you can see here, the UN has these like little androids. They kind of look like the robots from Chappie or Elysium. And the bigger, heavier hitting robots are there too. And then you've got like infantry units. So if you have like robots, you might have 2 in a slot selection. You might have 3 in the bigger units. You can watch a Let's Play on the channel right now. But they've got a whole bunch of new stuff coming out, which I'm pretty pumped for, because I'd like to be able to expand. And I'm sure that that Rob's going to be excited to expand his Manticore forces as well. So very cool stuff from Blackout coming out, and we do have more stuff planned. Rob was supposed to come in like the end of this month, but we got sidetracked, so that means we can paint up more new forces, I think, which is going to be exciting. Let's go back to the chat and see what else we got question wise. Hopefully no more flooding damage. No, there's no flooding damage. It's more like, so I had a sump pump installed in my basement, and so that there's no more basement flooding. But when it melts really, really fast, I like to stay on top of things. So there was a teeny bit of damp in the basement, but I was able to make sure that everything was okay. It's more my car now, which if you have any kind of vehicle with a moonroof, one of the things that you have to deal with is the fact that there's like on all 4 corners of a moonroof, there's a drain, because the seal eventually like dries out and goes around the moonroof. So when it rains for a long time, those drains can get clogged with just like road grease and stuff like that. You gotta get them cleaned. I had mine cleaned, but for some reason one of them is not quite cleaned, And very often I have to like make sure my car is somewhere covered so that I don't have an inch of water in the floor, short-circuiting my airbags and doing all kinds of terrible things. And then this spring, I'm going to take apart the liner of my car again and clean those tubes. It's great. Ryan Duffy says it's 8 Celsius here and roll up the rim started with physical cups again. Is the word trying to heal? That's the most Canadian shit you could have possibly said, Ryan. If you don't know what roll up the rim is a promotion that Tim Hortons does every year, which I am not currently participating in because I'm drinking my coffee the old-fashioned way, in a color-changing mug that shows sharks from the Ripley's Aquarium in Toronto. And yeah, you'd roll up the rim and there'd be like a prize inside, but they replaced it with an app for a long time because people were like stealing cups and doing all kinds of nonsense. So I'm for the Canadian is excited that Ryan's excited. Jess Hunt's here. Oh, I just realized this was on. How's everybody doing? And then Love says, I like this slight angle change. You did a good job making this room have like 6 different angles. Yeah, there's a lot of different angles I can shoot from in here. What this is it's me changing out cameras a bunch of times and being really sick of the fact that like I was using a super old camera on this. Like because I'm using this older iMac, the webcam is so shit. I was really tired of that. So I moved one of the cameras. And then if you notice, there's like a slight angle change too to where Chris is being shot from. It's because I relocated the camera in the room. So now it's like closer to a different, well, I don't know. This is just me and Malev talking shop. And then Matt Olson says, oh, thanks, man. Matt Olson gave me a super chat. He says, I hope this helps fix your relics. You man beast. Hashtag only dads. This is our version of only dads, 100%. Malev says, I watched the King Tide last night. Big recommend. The King Tide looks really good. It looks kind of like The Lighthouse, but from the point of view of like a mermaid, which is weird to make sense. I'm actually very excited about the King Tide. It was on my lists of things to see. Colin Filbert says, love the channel. Any chance you'd give Conquest a try on the channel? I'd be happy to donate the minis. So Owen and I tried to do Conquest way back in the beginning when it was just a starter set. And because he moved, we lost track of it. I was planning on getting back to it with the skirmish version, and doing a compare between their skirmish version and the new Song of Ice and Fire skirmish version. When the Song of Ice and Fire thing delivers, and doing like a week of like fantasy skirmish stuff. So yeah, I'm interested. Absolutely. And then ASL Baron says, when do we see the Trench Crusade on the table? I just got an email from somebody about Trench Crusade I need to respond to. So maybe soon. We'll see. And then Lorcan says, my local Sim's doing a Lynch season, so I'm planning to have a lot of his movies on this month. Oh, that's so nice. Having David Lynch pass away was one of those like David Bowie moments where you're like, oh no, were these the people keeping the wheels on the whole world? It's funny listening to people's like tributes to David Lynch the last little while, and I'm a huge David Lynch fan, so that would be amazing. I hope that like movie, like it's weird to say that those movies are comforting because they're also surreal and disconcerting, but I do find David Lynch movies like weirdly comforting. Not necessarily like comforting from a point of view of like it makes me feel good when I'm watching them, but it makes me feel good that someone spent their entire life making art exactly the way they wanted to make it and never like compromised and was like infinitely respected in his field, but also didn't make a fortune doing it and had to like raise money sitting on the side of the road being a weirdo. You know, like he never sold out. Like I find that super comforting. Like his attempt to sell it was Dune, and we all fucking watched Dune. So like, we all saw what happened when he tried to make Star Wars. We got Dune, which is not the best Dune, but also maybe still my favorite Dune, which I find very funny. Robbie V 101 says, Monday show on a Tuesday. Any update in the finale of Dan 25? I got way too emotionally invested in it. It'll probably happen over the summer. One of the big things that's been in the way of me recording, just full disclosure for you guys, is it has been abnormally cold this winter for Niagara. Normally, we don't really have to run the heat here because it's like Fahrenheit for you Americans watching. It's usually like between 40 and 50 degrees all winter. Like we have 2 or 3 days of like hardcore snow, and it usually melts like 2 or 3 days later, or like a day or two later. This year it's been, for everyone else, it's been in like -10 to -20 Celsius, which is like probably 10 to 15 Fahrenheit all winter, since Christmas, basically. To the point where my 11-year-old daughter was like, Dad, there's been snow on the ground since Christmas. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, that's never happened in my entire life. Like, this is crazy. This winter's insane. And I was like, oh, fuck, it has been like a decade since we've had like an actual winter. And it didn't really register with me until she said that, because like, that's just how winter was when I was a kid. But not having the furnace go, and like, I think it shorted out. We had a light, anyway, the short story long. Nick had a look at it. My furnace is in parallel with all the lights in the warehouse, and I should have the landlord come and fix it. It's not a huge deal, but, and for the most part, like my regulars, like my friends will just put coats on and like record anyway. But there's a lot of work to get that shit, you know, like done and also maintain all of this. So recording in the back is kind of slowed down until it warms back up. Like you saw Jordan in a coat doing Infinity. He was dying. I had a space heater or anything and he was still dying. Like his hands were like freezing. It was not great back there. So yeah, we've been getting through, but it has put like a real 3-month kibosh on a lot of this stuff. Strange Reactor says, has it occurred to you that maybe people aren't supposed to live where you live? Like, maybe, yes. And then Terry says, maybe I should do something like toss up a video with something like Warhammer Killer, Games Workshop Kicks Puppies, and talk about my game. I don't know what that's in reference to, but I love it. Tobias Newman says, and you changed the position of the lamp behind you. Thank you. The backlight was quite annoying. Yeah, I had to lift it up. It's funny because the varying height of the people that come in here, like I'm not a short guy, I'm 6'1", but like all of my friends are like 6'5" or higher, right? Like Jay's like 6'5", Owen was like 6'6", like even Dan's like 6'3" or 6'4". Like everybody I know for some reason is weirdly tall. And so the angle on every camera kind of has to change every now and again. And so and then that light had to go up and down too. So I've raised both those lights to the backlight to be different. Stranger actually says you can play 100 games of A Song of Ice and Fire in the time it takes to assemble the Conquest minis. Yikes. And then Ultramenta says, last night I listened to the 4-hour podcast you did with Chris, and it was great when I love the garbage time chats too. I have long thought on what can 40K learn from a kill team thing. Interesting. So in that Matt, Ultramenta, Matt is, again, longtime patron. He and I actually had to hang out when I was in Phoenix for Phoenix Comic Con like 7 or 8 years ago. The thing with the Inside Tabletops now is they're recorded live in front of the patrons. So if you guys want to like get it all at once, there's probably an extra 2 hours of content that's patrons only, where we do a show. We do basically an episode, and then we do like a 20-minute Q&A kind of in between. We take a break, and then we come back in and do another episode. And a lot of it's driven by the patrons through like topic mailbag and stuff like that too. So that's what he's talking about. If you're wondering where there's a 4-hour Inside Tabletop, that's because Chris and I did 4 episodes basically in parallel with like an in-between kind of like nonsense show that we do where we just chat and follow up and answer questions and stuff too. And Jesus says, Blood Meridian's my comfort read. Oh, Blood Meridian is magic. Ian Millington Davies says, with the large amount of small indie games now available, how do you feel about people playing them on Tabletop Simulator? I think Tabletop Simulator is a great equalizer. Like, that's a huge, I think, democratization of gaming. And it helped some games like get through the pandemic or even launch through the pandemic, like where they wouldn't probably have been able to normally. That is a huge advantage that games didn't have before. And you're actually seeing, I think, a lot of crowd funds now kick off with like a TTS mod ready to go. And it's also helping in game development. Like you can develop a game without ever having to be in the same country just by playing it on TTS. Make your assets in TTS, do all your playtesting through TTS. You can open playtesting and demos and stuff through TTS. I've had companies contact me being like, do you want to play this game on TTS? I personally can't do that. It's not for me, but I completely accept the fact that that has to do with my age and also what I get at a tabletop gaming, where for me it's a social experience. And that's really hard to replicate for me digitally because I need people in the room with me, like fucking around and laughing to fully be able to appreciate it. So while I don't think it's a personal like thing for me, I can fully recognize the value that it's had for the industry, and in particular for like game development and independent games. Yeah, Larkin Nichols says a bunch of people at Race Red were trooping in with things like popcorn. I was like, this is not a popcorn movie. And it was clear from the noise at the end. This is the first time for some of them. Patrick Nichols says, I just can't wrap my head around Eraserhead. Everyone's still talking about David Lynch. Lamash just says, you can do Celsius. We know at this point that 27 plus is real hot. I try and convert. I got 350, 400 million people to the south of me that need to know what the temperature is up here and why they can't get their miniature games played in front of them. So yeah, it's been this is what you get when the gorilla of this all, right, is that we're in an office park that is not the highest rent area of Niagara. And that means things might break sometimes. ASL Baron says, any further updates on Guards of Trader Toll? Not yet, but I am still working on it. And then Ariel Sanchez says, they say that people get more interested in historicals as they get older. Port Royale released on my 50th birthday. How convenient. That is convenient. I'm going to go to the mailbag because I just realized I haven't done that and we're halfway through. Shit. Okay. Let's see. I'm just going to make sure I didn't miss anything super... Just people talking about TTS. Yeah, I'm love talking about championing Relic Blade, global campaign on TTS. Lamash just said, yeah, I can never get past how clunky it felt. Yeah, so it's not for everybody, but like, I think one of the valuable things when you're at a certain point in your hobby is realizing the parts of your hobby that might, like the parts of like the industry that aren't made for you anymore, but that they still have value. Like, to me, that's really important. I think that's actually the biggest, like, if there was a huge bottleneck in this industry, it's people thinking that their interpretation of what their hobby is the right way to have a hobby and that anybody else's interpretation is invalid. I don't know. If I have one superpower, I think it's that I can hold two things like that in my head at the same time. We've talked about that quite a bit. So I do think that's really important. And I can recognize that yeah, it's been super valuable. Kevin Mitchell says, I'm going to be teaching Void Admiral to 2 friends in a couple weeks. Just finished off some spaceships and I'm all set. I wouldn't have heard it without your bid, so thanks. No, thank you from Paul, because Paul's been super happy with... I think Void Admiral is a great example, and Paul's a great example of like the core mission at GMG, right? Which is to mix just enough like pop culture news and like mainstream shit with indie shit that the indie shit gets lifted up in the tide, right? And unfortunately, YouTube hates that. The algorithm hates that. It doesn't want there to be like a variety show ever. It just wants to be able to market one thing. Like, AI hates when it can't classify you, which is again why I have 120,000 subscribers and less views than a commensurately sized group. And that's purely the algorithm just hating what I do and the way that I do it. But luckily, it doesn't matter to the patrons and it still fulfills its mission, because for Paul to be able to see like what he saw basically out of those videos happening, I think is the reason Paul could then like write 2 or 3 more books and like justify, to his partner and his free time commitments. Like, no, this is actually happening now. Like, so yeah, so I do think it's super important, and it's why I think the indie hour is so important, and why I'm so happy that like the patrons have basically like picked up on that and decided that that's a thing that they want to keep happening. Ryan being another good example of this. Ryan, one of the things I made sure of when I built out my garage and wood shop / gaming space is I wanted good temperatures year round. My space heater has been earning its rent this winter. I bet it has. And then she says, I bet Void Admiral got a huge bump from Ash. I ordered it too and haven't actually played it yet. Well, I can verify that. Like, Paul's just straight up been like, yeah, this is like, it like 5x what I'd ever sold basically when that video went out. And I think that's the point of like doing this to me. There's no sex, drugs, and rock and roll in championing boutique businesses. But I'm going to keep doing it as long as the patrons can keep it happening, because we sure as shit aren't making advertising revenue, which is very funny. And then ASL Baron says, need more Ash and Jay talking Grim Dark. Such a great series. It'll be happening. It just takes the time. And then she says, I'm still waiting for Ash and Jay to play the Fighting Fantasy Gamebook series. So we were talking about doing that remotely and having one of us be the reader and one of us be the recorder. I think that would be super fun to do. Senator 79 says, any thoughts on Parabellum Conquest game? I couldn't find on your channel. Maybe I missed it. No, I actually just answered that question a minute ago. It was a game that we got the starter set for when that was all that was available. And like the month after that, Owen moved to Calgary in Alberta, and it kind of got lost. It was just one of those things where he picked it up, I think, on a whim when it first came out, and there was no other releases. And we started it, and then he took off and left me, abandoned me forever. And we just haven't circled back around to it. But the First Blood version of it is something that I've been talking about doing for a minute, and then pairing it with other sort of similar games. All right, let's go to the mailbag and take some mailbag questions. The Lord Chompy Bits. I'm participating at my first tournament at Adepticon this year, playing in the Kill Team doubles event with my brother. We've only played Kill Team with each other and don't take it super seriously, but would like to not ruin anyone else's experience playing in the tournament. Neither of us are really competitive and just enjoy playing the game. Any advice going into this new experience? The possibility of not being prepared and screwing it up has given me anxiety, and I just want to have a good time. So I think the most important thing to do then, if you're going to go play this at an event space like Adepticon, is you're doing kind of the important emotional labor right now, which is realizing people are going to be at that event for a variety of different reasons. And you are definitely, in your first games at least, I'm going to say in your first 2 games, let's say it goes 4 games. In your first 2 games, that is when you are most likely to encounter people who are there for a different reason than you, because the mix is fairly random or you haven't found your level yet. And so that means that for those first 2 games, at least, I think it's super important to have a social contract conversation. Talk to them about because I think all the bad experiences that come from playing games and tournaments come from not saying that and being like, hey, I'm kind of nervous. I've only ever played my brother. I might ask you questions. I'm going to take it in good faith. You can ask me any questions you want about what I'm playing, because I know this game's got tons of nested rules. So let's just communicate really clearly. I'm sure to have a good time. I'm not super concerned about who's winning. My point of being here at the tournament is to play 4 games of Kill Team in a row against people I've never played against before. So I hope that's what you're here for too. And let's have a good game. That conversation just heads off so much bullshit. Even if they're there to crush your spirit, having that conversation at the beginning will hopefully, and yes, there is a not 0% chance that having that conversation with someone who's there to crush your spirit, they're going to be it's a trick. They're actually going to try and fuck me with it. That type of paranoid gaming experience can still happen. You just need to walk in and be there's always a 1% chance I'm talking to a living hand grenade who's going to become very fucking emotionally invested in the outcome of this game. And I can't do anything about that. But 99.999% of the time, having that conversation means that win, lose, or draw, you're going to have a great experience. But yeah, learn their name, shake their hand, tell them why you're there, tell them what your goal is for the weekend. I would say that then it doesn't matter what your experience level is. And I don't want to make a generalization. I think you'll be better off in Kill Team than you will be in 40K. There's I could rank social contract games basically. It's the reason why I like Infinity so much. Infinity is the social contract game. You can't play Infinity without a strong social contract at any level. It's why I went to Calgary, at the beginning of the month and played 5 games over 2 days and was not exhausted and tired afterwards, because I had great games against everybody and they were memorable and they were cinematic and we had a great time. Because the nature of that game requires positive interaction with you and your opponent. 40K, it's less interactive, right? It's more gacha based and meta building. Kill Team tends not to be as close to that fire, so I think just having that conversation, you should be fine. And have a great time. I'm still on the fence if I'm going to Adepticon or not. If I am, it'll be low key. Gene Dean 29 says, speaking of chasing the meta, GW has been awesome at creating the FOMO for a lot of their stuff. And a lot of folks always lament about the thing they wish they'd bought, saved, kept, and hidden and safe. And I've always wondered what you, Ash, have regretted not getting, or the thing that you missed out on. Maybe not GW stuff specifically, and I'm looking at you, G.I. Joe, USS Flag Aircraft Carrier. That's a good question. So I think actually part of your answer comes in the show that came out yesterday, the Inside Tabletop that Chris and I talked about, where the nature of workshops sales model has shifted, because it used to be a guarantee of service in the beginning, where it was we will make sure we have what you're looking for whenever you come in, because we can't guarantee that in a friendly local game store. And so we'll make sure our hobby centers have that and our website has that. They've moved more to a lean stock model of, we want to make sure every time we make something, it eventually sells. So we're going to run a lean stock model. We're going to use exclusive, and instead of doing a service added business model for our direct sales chain. We're going to do an exclusive product sales model to drive you there. And like the line jumping model of like being able to get through the queue early to pre-order. You know what I mean? Like that's, once you know that in and of itself, like that you can almost be guaranteed to pre-order something that's going to sell it in the website just by going to a hobby store when it opens. That's a huge deal. Like that's for some bit, like, and again, that FOMO stuff kind of like pushes that thing. So while I was there, that wasn't really an issue. And I kind of have everything that I want, like, from like a workshop point of view. And I'll be honest, they haven't really made anything in the last 10 years that I think I've missed out on. Mostly because I'm going to say it's the Marvel of it all, like the Disneyification of it all. A lot of what they've come out with is a reimagining of a thing I already have, right? So like, I think the last time I really cared about that was like the 2009 Space Hulk, because I loved first and second edition Space Hulk. So having copies of that was really important to me, because I was like, oh my God, look what they've been able to do with like modern miniature design and modern cardboard printing. Like, look how pretty this is. And if I want to, I can play the old game with just these miniatures and this pretty table. So it really meant something to me. But that even in of itself is like a copy of a copy, right? We're like editions later. And for some reason in tabletop gaming, like in miniature wargaming, we tend to applaud iterating. Like we applaud making a newer, better, tighter version for some reason, because we think if we get it perfect, we're gonna have the perfect experience. I personally think that's bullshit. And I think that all the iterations of it are valuable because they're based upon the time in your life when you got to do them more than they are the actual quality of the product. Like you can make the nicest miniatures, the nicest game of all time. If you don't have great people to play them with, you're just jerking off. You know what I mean? Like it's just, you're appreciating something alone by yourself and you're not having the full experience. The full experience of any game is the great people that you meet that like you get to enjoy it with. Anything else is just fucking masturbation and thinking you're smarter and better than anybody else. And I personally don't think that there's a ton of value in that. That gets old real fast. So yeah, there hasn't really been anything. I can't think of anything that I missed out on where I'm like, fuck, I really wish I had that. Yeah, I can't really think of it. I knew a kid that had the USS Flag G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, so I don't really give a fuck about that anymore. All right, let's check back in with the chat, see what everybody's doing, and see what they thought of that. Holy shit. Andrew B's here. Tobias Newman's here. Hooray for variety. Oh, thank you. All these super chats. I'm just going to do them first. Andrew B, the advanced fighting fantasy video where I beat up those goblins at the start, and Jay's the DM, keeping my favorite video on the entire channel. I will say the deluxe edition of the Advanced Fighting Fantasy rulebook might be my favorite rulebook I've bought in the last 10 years. It's like a phone book big, and I have all, like, they're right here. So if you guys haven't ever played this before, these are Ian Livingston and Steve Jackson's original Fighting Fantasy. Like, this is an RPG, and they are badass. This is like a little RPG book, made by the two guys who founded Games Workshop, and there's like a new Ultimate Edition of these that they've made. In fact, shout out to, and there's like a Monsters Committee called Out of the Pit and stuff too. But shout out to Ian Livingston. He's actually doing a crowdfund right now for new editions of all the original Fighting Fantasy books. With the original art is the important thing. So if you like grimdark art, go check it out. But I love that Andrew B loves that because it's one of my favorite things we've done too. Tobias, thanks man for the variety shout out, because like, I'll be honest, that's the thing that keeps me going. Like there's a real, I don't know how people do 40K videos forever. And everybody else said, what's up gamers? I just woke up. I turned 35 in 2 days. Also, Ash, don't forget to pimp the Patreon. You're much better at that than I am. I tried to just actually, you know what? Before you woke up, dude, I tried to, Andrew, by saying, by basically explaining where people could find the 4 hours of nonsense that was Chris and me doing inside tabletop. What else we got? Larkin Nable says the most important thing is to throw the social status step aside peons at tabletop gaming timers coming through. That's so funny. I don't try to do that. Colin Fobert says, I'm from Ontario, so if you need conquest support, I'm happy to help. Oh, awesome. That's cool. Yeah, DM me about that. Maybe actually send me an email. The email's in the video description. I'm not this video, but any other video, because this one's just a live thing, so I do like a quick description. But send me an email, because I won't the DMs, the fucking inboxes are so full that they're hard to keep track of. ASL Baron says, what Kickstarters are you excited about right now? I mean, not really any, except for that Fighting Fantasy one I just talked about. Jez says, I bought Rangers of Shadow Deep because of this channel. Then I bought everything by Joe McCullough and introduced a few folks to tabletop gaming via Rangers. So you're doing the Lord's work. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Rob Miller says, if you thought about trying out the Fantasy Infinity, Warcrow is what you're thinking about. I'm actually going to be giving it a demo on Saturday with my buddy Ben, which I'm very excited about. And then Tom Cooch says, losing your first game against a rando and then being matched up against similarly minded folks is the best way to enjoy a tournament. Tom is 100% right. And Tom has been to Adepticon many times for Infinity. So he can be taken as a voice of reason in this. Jess says, Joe definitely owes me a pint. Joe has paid me back infinitely many, many times with his friendship. Joe owes me nothing. Mr. McCullough and I have, we have the mutual bond of going it alone in an industry that does not want you to go it alone. So there is nothing more that I require from him. Matt says, Gorm the horse and Lars the ram and his harem need fodder. So I'll have to live stream go into my coveralls front pocket, have a beer from Gorm. I love the name of your animals, dude. Ryan says, man, the point of tabletop gaming for me is just to have fun and tell stories with my buddies. I've avoided tournaments for that reason, but I know it's tarnished my experience with 40K. Yeah, I think any game, like honestly, any game can boil down to the time you spend with other people. And I think actually that's also one of the things that feeds that unhappiness or that like negative feeling about a game company when they like move away from you. And I do think that's because we mentioned that in the video from Monday where we talked about how Games Workshop's hobby centers changing wasn't for some people, not because of like, they're not doing anything wrong by changing into a more business structured environment. They're growing as their business grows and changes, but they're moving away from the people they created. And it's okay for those people to be nostalgic and sad and kind of upset that it's not for them anymore too. And that's where I think it's so important for places like, honestly, I do think it's a really big reason why Lords of War has been so popular. Is there like a good marriage of those two things? They have all of the experience of like what a community hobby center was when they built their store, but they also have this great acumen basically of like, well, no, we also have to survive. Like we have 4 kids between the two of us. Like we need to stay open. And so, yeah, I do think that's a big deal. Brian Crane says you can either play for the tabletop accolades, the middle table respect, or the bottom table camaraderie. And then Jesus says, what I miss most about early 90s GW stores is the smell, and I will not elaborate. Chris Fisher says, you make the world a better place, Ash. Thanks for being a real person, or at least a fairly convincing AI. Thank you. If I'm an AI, this AI is, I don't know what it trained on, but apparently it was Simpson quotes and fucking mid-90s hip-hop and all kinds of other bullshit and drugs. They gave this AI a lot of drugs. Logan Nagel says, I came second in the Alpha Strike tournament this weekend before last, and while I knew I was doing very well, I assumed I was mid-tier until the very end. Aw. And Ghost Mutton says, I noticed there's a lot of small-scale futuristic games. Do you know of any newer fantasy epic scale games out there? Not really. And then Atrigon X says, thank you for reminding me I don't have any friends to play games with. Stop it. Dan Sprinkle says, I have a FOMO box of things that I ordered that never really got around to playing in 8th edition. An 8th and 9th edition, like 40K special edition, and even the 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle stuff. I look at it when I think about making an order. Grand Bazaar says, first time catching you live. Well, welcome. I'm hoping you enjoy this. We do this every week on Patreon. Patreon, this is just us doing it live for everybody else now. So I can get to more questions. And now we got people freaking out about all my Steve Jackson books. Well, it's funny. I don't have a Lancia though. I lost it. So here's a story about these books. There's a third one called a Lancia. And yeah, so I took these when I was a camp counselor. We used to play this at like summer camp. And so this was one of the things that like we would take and like play, because me and a bunch of other counselors were all into like gaming because we were friends, like university and college friends. And my copy of a Lancia, it got taken out. I don't have a copy of Titan. I have multiple copies of Out of the Pit. My copy of Titan and my copy of Lancia got like blown out and lost, and they fucking disappeared. So it's gone. L. Armstrong Cochran says, the 7 TV review got me to join the Patreon and start sculpting minis for a Venture Brothers scenario. Speaking of which, these were gifts from last year. There's my Brock Sampson as a as a member of the Monarchs team. And then here's Speedy, who's about to get his wings. Speedy, who dies in the very first episode of Venture Brothers. These exist. And then I also have, these were a gift actually. And then I also have this, which is Speedy's death, which is Brock all covered in darts. The Swedish murder machine all covered in darts, gripping Speedy's neck, which is very funny. Raincoat Spirit says, hi from Vancouver, Ash. I love the variety on GMG. Have you ever considered Wily Games Fistful of Lead? I have all the Fistful of Lead games. It's been on the list of like, there's so, like Jay and I have played so many. We've played so many, whatchamacallit, like Wild West games, and we've got a list like a mile long. There are so many Wild West games, and Jay and I will eventually get to all of them, or Les and I will get to all of them at some point. Samaj Nolosaur says 40k tourney players tend to be like those guys in beer league softball that act like they're playing AAA baseball. I think that's a generalization. Oh Jesus, this fucking chair. This chair is like, I love these mid-century chairs that I got out of the Facebook Marketplace garbage, but they need some WD-40 at this point. That is a good, I mean, obviously that's a generalization. There is a level of that, I think, where I would say the terminally online ones are that way because they've spent so much time thinking about and plotting out like the meta of it that then when they come into real life, they have so many assumptions about how the game's going to be played. They do have like a level of like almost over the top self-confidence about how it's all going to go. Patton says the fighting fantasy game on Steam is extremely baller. That does sound exciting. And then Volcano says modern 40k isn't for me. It's devolved into a sports game where the units score points each round and then complain afterwards in a discussion taking place in the sports studio. Yeah. I think it's less sports and it's more esports. There's a I think that, well, and also there's a danger when money starts getting made commentating and being the best at something. I do think Chris and Jay from Lords of War, one of their episodes, I catch them infrequently, but I do catch them every now and again. They did make a really good point when they were like, only a percentage of people that follow tabletop gaming know the name of the person that won the 40K World Championships last year. And that person, that 40K World Championship person, is like the only person whose opinion kind of mattered this year for making 40K money on the internet. So think about what a narrow slice of pie that is for people to be chasing. To make like maybe one person can make a living doing it like full time as being like the best at 40K. That's a like, I don't think, and Games Workshop doesn't keep that person in rotation. That person's name's in like their communication and their advertising for like a couple weeks. And then they're just talking about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Like it just gets swept away. So like, I do think that's kind of keeping it from turning into that where you have all these subject matter experts and like TSN moguls and stuff. But it does get that like vibe, doesn't it, from like the terminally online folks. Andrew B says, sent you some PayPal money to help with the computer. Oh, thanks, dude. I need to get my Apple guy on it. Cause like I have an Apple guy named Alan. He's the least who you'd expect to be like an Apple enthusiast, but he's like a basement Apple like tech. Who also restores like classic trucks. So he's got like the big Ford truck in his garage, like the 50s Ford like truck that he's like restored, like flames on the side and shit. But he also has like a gallery of like every Macintosh computer back to like the Apple One in his basement. And he loves fucking tinkering with computers. So I gotta get him on the thing. On the horn. And then Matt's also in, get some WD-40. Fuck off, dude. I will, I promise. Thank you, man. So kind. Chris Pitcher says, Ash, have you tried Hobgoblin? I just impulse purchased it. I haven't tried it, but I've got the book too. I'm going to review it. Ron Dunphy says, I've got a Dr. Girlfriend figure in the package on my corkboard in the shop. Venture Brothers is required watching. I do think that, I do think that that's that like Metalocalypse and Venture Brothers is a period in Adult Swim television that I think Rick and Morty has been chasing the high from for its entire creation and will never quite achieve. Buzzrun says, I'd rather not see big money purses coming to mini wargaming. Let's just keep it fun. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I do think it's inevitably going to happen. I do think that eventually we try and commodify everything to the point where it kind of loses what it used to be. And that is like, I do think that is the magic of the community that we have here on GMG, is because we've all, and this is maybe, I don't want to like call anybody out, but because we've been doing it for so long, we realize there's no sex, drugs, and rock and roll in it. Like, you're not going to be able to like, it just doesn't matter at some point. So all you have is like your experiences doing it. And if you create good experiences doing it and you hang it with good people and quality people, then it doesn't fucking matter what you play. It's like those people that want to make like the perfect D&D that don't realize that like, you don't need the better role-playing game. You need better people to play role-playing games with, right? It doesn't matter. Like, you don't need better miniature. Your miniature collection is one collection. Dividing it and being like, well, these miniatures can only be used for this and these miniatures can only be used for this. That's the thing that keeps you in that FOMO loop. That's the thing that keeps you like thinking, I have to have the right thing to do the right thing. It's like, no, you have a collection of toys. Like, do whatever the fuck you want with it. Find other rules to play the game you want to play, or write those rules, right? They're out there, and then just be surrounded by good people to play games with. And Andrew just said, my brother coincidentally gave me a Dr. Girlfriend figure signed by Doc Hammer and Jackson Public. That's amazing. And then Armstrong Cochran says, it's always key to find the meaningful aspects of what's an inherently commercial art form. 100%. And then Tom says, wait, I'm not going to get groupies from winning Adepticon. Trip canceled. I don't even think you'll be able to find groupies at Adepticon this year because it's going to be so lost in that giant convention center that they're putting it in, which is crazy. Okay, let's finish off the mailbag because we are almost done. We're going to go a little bit long today because I'll take my time, but we'll finish the mailbag off. Brian Krantz says, what do you look for in a topic for Inside Tabletop? Is it something that you can personally have interest you, or something your guest can speak on authoritatively, or something you can spin into 30 minutes, etc.? Probably like a combination of all those things. Like, if it's something that I feel unqualified to talk about from a detail point of view, then like it all just comes down from like, how do I interact with it? If it's a topic that I don't personally have experience with, what I'll do is I'll comment from the sidelines and be like, hey, here's observationally, here's all the pieces I see. How does that go together? What's your experience with that? Versus like the last episode that Jay and I just done, or Chris and I just did, we've been inside that, right? Like, we've been inside that for like a quarter century. So we can speak pretty authoritatively to like where and how and why. But I think mostly what I look for in those topics is like, what aren't people talking about? Because I think there's a lot of that. Like, I think that what makes Inside Tabletop interesting to you guys is a topic you guys haven't considered. Does that make sense? Like, from the point of view of the people inside the industry. And that's the value of that series to me, is that bridges the consumer on the outside and like the hobbyist on the outside with the people making it on the inside. Like, just like the topic that like working in this industry is fucking lonely for the most part. It can even be lonely inside of a huge corporation like Games Workshop, because like once you get to a certain size, well, a corporation like Games Workshop, once you get to a certain size, you interact with a lot of people that don't see the enterprise the same as you do. Like, if you're a hugely passionate game designer and 70% of the people that you interact with daily, like eating lunch or walking around the building, are interested in like infrastructure or accounting or tech or web design, you don't have the same like reason for being there as them. They might just be there to collect a paycheck. And so that can feel kind of isolating and lonely. Versus like doing this where, you know, I'm physically by myself 90% of the time. That can be hugely lonely. That's not something that people who open the rule book and read the rules think about. And I think that has value because that tells you like, what is this thing that we're all collectively doing together? And how does my money make a difference? How does where I buy from make a difference? How does who I'm shopping with make a difference? Like, how does like just sending that guy a message being like, hey, this really resonated with me, makes a huge difference. Like, just feeling like something landed can make like a huge difference for people. So that to me is kind of what Inside Tabletop is supposed to be. It's supposed to be just like a look inside how the sausage gets made, some inside baseball stuff. Like, I think I do think sports analogies kind of work here, because it's easy to be a fan of a sports team and have no concept of what it actually looks like to be inside a sports team. I mean, that's why I love TV shows like Shoresy. It's a Canadian TV show made by the guys that made Letterkenny. That's about hockey. And Chris and I, it's funny because we talk about this too, because both of us have experience with hockey. Like that, they capture some of what it's like to be inside something you care about that nobody else really cares about, and that everyone's really ready to shit on or care too much about, like from the exterior point of view. Seeing it from the inside, like the soul of a hockey player really is kind of captured in that, especially a hockey player that never makes it, right? You might give your entire life to playing hockey and never be able to really support yourself financially from doing that. And then at some point push your body to the point where like you just can't do it anymore. And there's a lot of parallels to that with the tabletop industry. Like you might really care about, the social part of gaming or what people can get from like spending time in like a real world together and want to make games that like espouse that, but then hear nothing on like except online about how your rules are broken or you fucked up something in like the game design or your game isn't as good as 40K or why would I bother playing this if I don't have other people to play it with. Like that's really fucking disheartening for game designers and people that want to make it inside this industry that care about it in a meaningful way. So I think Inside Tabletop is important from kind of capturing that point of view for you guys, because otherwise like there's no windows, into the industry. You kind of have to be able to talk about it. Kev Mitchell says, I finally watched the Book of Eli after only 15 years of not watching it. It was most enjoyable. Anyway, it got me thinking, are you planning to go back to the 20 series with the ever awesome Jay? We'll get back to it. It's all just real world shit getting in the way of doing it. Okay, we are done. So let's go back to the chat and catch up at the end and see what everybody's talking about. And then we'll be winding down because we've hit an hour. So L Armstrong says, no, wait, we answered that one. Tom Kish says, Jess Hunt says, it's not what on the table, it's who's around the table that makes the game. Yep, I would agree 100%. I do think that mentality will get you more satisfied with the money and time you put into your games. And then Cheezy says the big brain move in gaming is to have one set of minis and just keep using different rules to play with them. That's it. Absolutely. And then the cool guy says, why does he look more like Ned Flanders lately? Maybe it's because you're getting the profile as opposed to the front. It's because my beard's so fucking gray now that all I have is the Ned Flanders mustache. Although my Halloween costume this year there's a beautiful piece of art. Maybe I can just pull it up for you guys. Here, I'll pull it up for you guys. One of my favorites. Oh, sorry, I made that go. That's the wrong window. Here, I'll pull this up so you guys can see it. This is a piece of art from the UK, one of my favorite pieces of art, and I went as this for Halloween because my kids thought it was amazing. Here, I'll pull this up so you guys can see it. This is a huge mural in the UK, and one of my favorite pieces of random art. But it was also I like a Halloween costume that is here we go. That is also like a meme. I'm a bit I'm a bit Bob's Burgers in that way, where I like my Halloween costumes to be a joke. This was my Halloween costume this year. I was NF Doom. And if you guys don't know who that is, then you are not paying attention to what's behind me typically in the studio. But that was my Halloween costume this year. So if I'm looking a little bit more like Ned Flanders recently, I mean, maybe there's a reason why. Maybe it's because I'm slowly turning into NF Doom, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, right? Let's just catch up at the end here with the chat. And she says, I had no idea GW stores were single staff members now. That blew my mind. I haven't been able to into one for years. So like, that's not universally true, but that has been the goal from the reshaping of the retail chain, is that the vast majority of them are. There's legacy stores that still have more than one. And there's also like loss leader stores. Like you're never going to be able to find a location in downtown London or downtown New York City that you can run that way. So you're going to have multi-staff stores still somewhere. And then Atron says, Canadians playing hockey? What is this, Cool Runnings? I mean, we have to be good at something. Gary Jensen says, Ash, what's your opinion on DIY versus ready-made? I've been a DIY guy from the start. My problem is I just traded time for money, which isn't always the best route. Thoughts? I think it transitions. I think gaming mats are a great example of that. Like why gaming mats have kind of changed the landscape of miniature wargaming is they've made it way easier to not have to have a dedicated gaming space in your house. And so like just getting a pre-made gaming mat and not having a gaming table that you DIY'd yourself. I think DIY is important if you take pride in that, and that's an element of how you do your hobby. I don't think it's required anymore though, and I think that it takes away like a barrier for some people. Malev says, I want to make games and I also have to be able to eat. 100%. Alan Wong says, it takes most people 20 plus years to realize the ultimate wargaming experience is not a specific game, but a group of hobbyists you vibe with, and the prize really is the friends you made along the way. Alan, having watched you be a gamer for almost 20 years, I could absolutely agree, and I thoroughly enjoyed our final game at the Tactical Awareness Tournament because of that. And Lorcan says, unironically, this. I would agree. Malev says, video games are designed to be fun, but tabletop games are designed to be for you to be fun. Yeah, I agree. And Matt says, no, Malev, you miss out on the starving part of the starving artist part then. Dun Grizzly says, simply thank you, Ash, for doing what you do the way that you do it. I appreciate that, man. I will continue to be at the merciless seas of the algorithm. So thank you to the patrons that make this possible, because literally this channel doesn't exist. I can't make this the way that we've decided to make it without the patrons, because there's no money in YouTubing the way that I YouTube. And then Al says, I wish I could have my tabletop stuff as anything more than a side job. And then Malev says, NF Doom, haha. Yeah, I mean, I think keeping it in that space, though, can keep you enjoying it. Making it your full time for people like me and Malev can make it a really scary proposition that burns you out as well. So I think there's some value in that. Lurkin says, I like my burgers the same way I like my man. Well done and served between two pieces of bread. I don't know what that means, but I'm here for it. Just says Doom Diddly. That's it. That's Diddly dope, Tom says. Colin Frobin says, RIP the Oakville bunker. Agreed. And then Kev Mitchell says, smash that like, hit that bell, join that Patreon. Ryan says, time versus money is a good topic of discussion. I think it all depends on how much you enjoy doing what you're doing. And I do think it changes over time. Will H says, visit any new local hobby game shops lately? I feel like my independents are moving far away from the Warhammer stores and heading towards. Yeah. Going to Torchlight Games in Burlington a little while ago blew my mind, because it's like an office building. It has so much square footage, like an insane amount of square footage, and is an online retailer with a massive physical community space. It was really interesting seeing that location. We should probably talk about it at some point. And Jesus says, have you considered Hot Tub Trench Crusade as a stream idea? Maybe. And Malev says, merciless seas of the algorithm, batten down the hatches, lads. I imagine we're all in one of them Alaskan crab ships. That's not far off. This is the deadliest catch of miniature wargaming YouTube channels. So yeah, we're done. We've hit an hour. I want to thank everybody for taking part, for my lovely patrons for being wonderful stewards of this stream, and for everybody that jumped in that doesn't normally get to take part of these. I hope you enjoyed it. This is kind of a weekly thing that we do where we all talk about what's been going on in the world, like tabletop gaming, and catch up on what's coming up next. So I did say I am doing a Warcrow demo on the weekends. I'm going to be filming more of the First Light stuff as well for whatchamacallit, Hero Quest, which I'm excited to come out with soon. And then we've got more spear tips coming out this week. Another one with Mike and one with Chase. I've got a bunch of other like recording stuff during the weekend. It's all solo work. So yeah, lots of stuff coming out, and more indie games for the Tuesday slot, because now that we got Void Admiral going, I'm going to try and like keep that Tuesday slot actually full. So I hope you guys are having a great rest of your week. If you are around on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, and you're a patron, you'll be able to be part of it's looking like it's neck and neck right now between Freeblades and what was the other one? Shoot. Freeblades and something else that I've immediately forgotten the name of. Freeblades and the GMG Indie Hour. Hang on, I just pulled it up. It's like Alex, Sector Alex or something like that. Sector A. I'm gonna forget the name. Because there's 25. I've maxed out the poll options now for the Indie Hour, which means that we're always like at max capacity basically. Sector Alix, I think it's called. They're both neck and neck. So patrons, get in and get your votes in for the vote. But anyway, we'll have a new Indie Hour tomorrow, which will be recorded live. And then you guys will get to see the Indie Hour from last week. If you're just on YouTube, that will go up tomorrow morning as well, which is all zombie themed. So a whole bunch of zombie shit. Sector Alix. Sector Alix is what it's called. I want to say Aleph for whatever reason, but it's the infinity in my head. Yeah, Sector Aleph currently tied with Free Blades for our topic for the week. So get in there and break that tie. And then, yeah, the Indie Hour is going to get recorded. We've got more stuff coming up for this other, the patrons will get the next Inside Tabletop podcast early. And then on Sunday, the next Inside Tabletop goes up. I got some book reviews to do and stuff as well. So yeah, tons of shit happening behind the scenes, which will also be happening later on. Oh, Free Radio Armageddon says Monday on a Tuesday. Does this mean that Taco Tuesday is now on a Friday? Maybe. Thank you so much for the super chat. And then Matt says oil my chair. I will WD-40 this chair as well. Yeah, but have a great rest of your week. I'll catch up with you guys live on the Patreon for Inside Tabletop, and we'll have our new Inside Tabletop come up as well for the rest of you guys. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.